Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Tel Aviv University and MIT Enterprise Forum for hosting us. It's my pleasure to be here. I know that we have a mixed audience here of some very successful entrepreneurs and other investors. And I know we have some young founders who are on their first startup. What I'd like to do is run you through the process of at least the founders. If you can issue spot on all of the legal issues, and what you get out of this presentation is being able to identify all of the legal issues and business issues and operational issues that you need to think about as you consider possibly entering into the New York market and the larger U.S. market. New York right now is and New York State in particular is actually one of the most exciting places for startups. Last week I got several phone calls from actually California companies who were looking to relocate to New York. You probably know that if you're doing conference calls with Silicon Valley, 9-10 hour difference here between Israel and California. But what you may not know is that there is a tremendous ecosystem that is growing in New York State. This year in 2014, New York State will have more startups starting up in New York State, including not only New York City, Manhattan, and the other outer boroughs, but in Albany, in Buffalo, than Silicon Valley, new startups in Silicon Valley. And while there are more startups in Silicon Valley as a totality right now, in New York State, the numbers are growing. The ecosystem is expanding rapidly. The governor has initiated an initiative called Startup New York, which is a 10-year tax-free program to essentially founders and employees who move. There's some requirements for the programs, and we help guide people through Startup New York. In New York City, in Roosevelt Island, there's going to be the, right now there already is the Cornell Technion campus that is opening up. There's an expansion on the west side of Manhattan. Google is opening up new headquarters and looking for tremendous amount of space, actually that's larger than half the Chrysler building. There's an expansion in Midtown East, and there are new life science and tech hubs in Brooklyn in the outer source. But that's just a story downstate. Upstate, in the capital region, the Israeli government has come to some agreements with Albany-based universities to attract Israeli companies to the Albany region. And in western New York, which is more than just a frontier, but Buffalo, right outside of the Niagara region, a short ride away from Toronto, and less than an hour plane ride to New York City, you have a startup ecosystem that is growing tremendously. We've partnered with 43 North to introduce you to this business plan competition, and the potential is just huge. Entrepreneurs from Israel, the statistics show, set up between 600 and 700 companies, that's just in tech, each year. Only 1,000 of those usually go on to raise venture capital locally, according to the IBC research centers. Obviously, some of them have very unique IP. Many Israeli companies are already on the NASDAQ. You guys know that. But the market entry point of New York State, and not necessarily Manhattan, and not necessarily New York City or Brooklyn or the outer boroughs, is very attractive, not only because of its diversity, not only because of its size, but just think of how many types of markets. Just like here in Israel, you have Tel Aviv, you have the Negev, and you have the Galil, and you have other regions. You have a diversity of marketplaces. You have cities like Buffalo, which are smaller cities, but you could maybe test concepts before launching in a larger city. So the typical trajectory of an Israeli company coming to the New York, coming or entering into the U.S. May not be the typical vision that you have. You have to think of costs. Obviously, it's very expensive to live in Manhattan and start a startup. You could maybe burn some cash relatively quickly. So you may want to look at other possibilities. And if you're an Israeli founder, you have to think, what is it that I have to think about? I mean, there's so many things. Operationally, HR issues, employment issues, corporate tax structure issues, finance, marketing. You have, as a founder, so many issues on your mind. And, I'm going to try to go over what some of those rules of the road that you have to think about are. With respect to overall, let's move to corporate formation and tax planning. Your typical situation may be that you may have a Delaware C corporation, obviously going and having authority to do business in New York. Delaware is a preferred jurisdiction to set up the actual corporation. You have to realize that if you set up as a Delaware corporation, you will pay, there's double tax, right? Because it's not a flow-through, pass-through entity as it is, for example, in LLCs. But if you're looking for venture financing, if you're looking to go to the regular VCs, that's probably the route that you want to go. The C corporation is a preferred vehicle for especially Israeli subsidiaries who want to do business in the United States and venture capital financing. Limited liability companies are another option in terms of structure. There are some advantages and disadvantages to them. If you have Israeli shareholders, it may expose you to additional tax regulatory filings over there, depending on the issues. But overall, depending on the company, if it's a service company or if it's a company that's looking for institutional investment, there are many factors that go into corporate planning. Obviously, the U.S. And Israel have a tax treaty. You guys might be aware of it. There are a lot of complicated regulations with respect to, when the treaty applies and when the other treaty applies. But I did want to point out that with respect to intellectual property location and the sale of intellectual property and the transfer and the sale, that does trigger Israeli taxes under the Israeli tax rules and regulations, and it's a lot of planning and thinking that you need to do with your counsel. I'm not going to bore you with some of the more complicated seed financing, crowd financing, the various levels. VCs are going to look overall when you're ready for your Series A to get a preferred interest on their investments, to have liquidation preferences and participating preferreds versus convertible preferreds, anti-dilution rights. If you have questions about that, feel free to ask me after the session ends. But overall, know that they will get preferences. They will have special voting rights. They will have redemption rights. They will have conversion rights. So, what's left for the founders and employees? Obviously, sweat equity gets common stock. The capital gets the rights and the preferences and the privileges and the protections of the preferred, and the founders have the potential for the upside. You always have to keep in mind, in the United States we do have a federal system and then state laws and even, municipal laws. You have to deal with a host of applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations. You want to ensure that you have proper employment agreements with confidentiality and IP assignment agreements in place. You want to document employee grants to avoid diligence questions and problems down the road. And one particular issue that trips up a lot of startups that come and enter the U.S. marketplace is this issue between employees and independent contractors. Your company doesn't want to be in a situation where your independent contractor is later found to be an employee for federal or state law purposes, and you want to avoid those kinds of penalties. So you should sit down with your counsel and make sure you take care of those issues. Equity incentives. If any of you have questions afterwards about non-qualifying stock option plans and incentive stock option plans and the different rules, feel free to come and ask. But obviously, stock options are going to be a critical part of your strategy to attract employees. And if you need to give options to consultants and advisors, then you take a different strategy. Restricted stock, vesting, and the time that the options vest. Change of control provisions are usually dealt with. And if you're a founder, then employer protections are particularly important in your plans. You want to be in a situation where you have repurchase rights. You want to be in a situation where there's going to be limited windows to exercise these stock options. You want to make sure that you have a right of first refusal and drag along and tag along rights. Well, drag along. I don't know about tag along. And there is this whole issue with 83B. I want you guys to just be able to ask the question if it comes up, but be mindful of it. Be mindful of it. Obviously, if you're part of an accelerator program such as 43 North, you don't have to worry about space per se. 43 North will provide you the space for a certain time period. Not everybody who wins who may win the competition. So you are going to need to deal with landlords. It's different than dealing with landlords here in Israel. There are sometimes limits on the use of property. And most important, you should keep in mind what occurs if there's a change of control. Landlords are getting more and more sophisticated in the United States with respect to tech companies. And it used to be in the olden days when you do deals, you'd have they wouldn't be so keen, and their counsel wouldn't be so keen on dealing with the change of control issues. Now they're very, very much interested in it. And of course, renting equipment and office equipment and bringing in and dealing with those equipment leases. Intellectual property protections in the U.S. Most of you probably know a lot about setting up patents. Investors, acquirers, and commercial partners in the United States are going to perform a tremendous amount of due diligence on your company's intellectual property protection. And they're going to ask hard questions. Does the Israeli company really own the IP? How did it come about? Is it from a university? Is it from a private employer? Is it from an individual? Are there a particular chain of command and chain of ownership title documents in place? So you want to make sure that there are appropriate IP assignment agreements. You want to make sure that you apply appropriately for your patents when you're able to. You want to make sure you understand what is protectable with respect to trade secrets, and want to make sure that you cover the trademarks and the copyrights. I sat in Herzliya yesterday with a founder who was launching a company in the United States. He's actually going to be in New York next week, and it's in the financial services sphere. And it amazed me that they didn't think about, privacy issues, some Graham-Leach-Blively Act issues for financial activities. In the United States, we have many, many rules and regulations, both on the federal level and on the state level, with respect to privacy. And no knock to the friends at the embassy, but we have a lot of rules and regulations. I don't know if everything is really private these days with everything going on with the NSA, but we do have a lot of rules and regulations about it, and you do need to comply. The California Attorney General has put out guidance for mobile app development companies when they're building mobile apps. You have to particularly comply with the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and that's whether you're really targeting children or not. I can tell you that there are some companies who are targeting certain markets that don't even enter certain markets because they may not necessarily, they want to avoid regulatory scrutiny and obviously the data security requirements. So just be mindful of them. As you're entering the U.S. marketplace, depending again on the type of company, if you're just not, you may have customs issues, you may have unique contractual issues, you may not initially set up your subsidiary company, and you may have distributorship, joint ventures. This next one on sales representative laws, you have to be really, really careful with to make sure you don't trip up. I had one Israeli company who had sent a bunch of sales representatives actually into Minnesota. Minnesota has one of the strictest sales representative laws in the United States, and we're either very specific with respect to having the agreement in writing and making sure the commissions are paid. New York also has one, and this is one that really trips a lot of startups. So you really need to make sure, because you're trying to cover all 50 states, that you're complying with those issues. Obviously, you have securities laws issues. That's dealt with mostly on the federal level, but there also are state blue sky laws depending on how you're doing your financing and when you're large enough, antitrust issues. I'm not going to delve too deeply into the immigration. If you're part of the 43 North program, they have a great solution for you. And for those of you that are interested, we have a special immigration presentation of the F1 program, the L1 program, the H1B, which is, God, I wish it wasn't so limited, and even EB5s. So I'd be happy to speak to you. And that's it. Thank you very much.